This is my quick tutorial for ZBrush. We've had a bumpy start with our class. Hopefully I'll have no technical bugs this time, but I'm going to go over some of the interface and how to deal with it and how to interact with this. If you've watched some of the tutorials of the link I sent recently, this will just add to that. So you're going to open up ZBrush, and this right here is our main canvas, and you'll notice that when you first open up ZBrush, this spotlight window opens up. To get rid of that, you press the comma key. To bring it back, you press the comma key again. Inside here, you have some simple meshes that you can import and start with. Some more complex ones like this face and this full body. Also along here, you'll find all kinds of other goodies. What I sometimes do for me is I have specialty brushes loaded in here. When you open up yours versus mine, you'll see that I have a lot of extra tools loaded in here. For now, you don't have to worry about that. But what also is very, very important is if your program crashes, you have this quick save pull down, and you can see some of the projects I've been working on. So that's what we'll be doing with Lightbox. But for right now, let's look at the rest of this. Now, this is my custom UI. What I've done is I have the draw button and the move buttons and all that, and some of my favorite brushes that I use over and over down here. And then this is the main area here where you're going to have a lot of drop-down menus. You don't see much here yet because we haven't opened anything up yet. So what we're going to do really quickly is start with a simple 3D sphere. You could pick one of these to do that, but I'm going to start by just grabbing a simple sphere. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to drag and draw my sphere. Now if I do nothing else, you'll notice that if I keep doing it, it'll just keep drawing because I haven't made any changes yet. So I'm going to hit Control N to clear my canvas. It gives you a new canvas. I'm going to drag one more time by holding down the N key, the Shift key, and then I'm going to go over to this button right here. In your interface, it might be along the top here, but I'm going to hit the Edit button. Now, you would think right now I could start editing, but this was just a simple sphere, a simple brush, or a simple shape. So now I'm going to go all the way up to here where it says Make Poly 3D, and I'm going to do that. And now we are ready to go. If you look right here, you'll see this kind of a head here. If I push this blue button, it's going to kind of zero it out and bring it to the facing forward. So if I hit the left button or the bottom button, it'll change all those directions. But if I hit the blue button, it should have you face this way. Now, one of the things that I like to do when I'm starting to sculpt on something is I want to make sure that the symmetry is on. Okay. Now you see right now, if you're working with this program, I should probably talk about the interface first. So when you're moving your cursor off of the model and in the field, what's going to happen is the model will move around. I'm going to sculpt briefly on the model, and just so we have some difference so you can see what's going on. So I press the letter X to get symmetry. So you can see the second dot here that's moving in the opposite direction of your cursor. That means that the symmetry is on, so that it will sculpt on this side, the same thing will sculpt on that side. If you hit X, it disappears, and then you'll see I can only draw on that side. But if I don't want that, I can just do Control Z to undo it. I'm going to press X again so I have symmetry. Now, to move the model around, by clicking off of the model, I can just move the character back and forth, okay? If I want the character to snap to a particular side, like the left side, there's a couple of ways to do it. First way is I could just press this button right here, and then it'll be looking left. And if I keep going, he'll look right. If I want to look at him from straight down, it'll be like that. If I want him to be centered, boom, I hit that. But instead of going all the way over here, I can actually move the cursor around, and if I hold the Shift key while moving it, it'll snap to the left. If I move it and then push the shift key, it'll snap to the closest version or closest position. Now, while you're moving this character around, and you might find yourself getting the character way off in the distance and you get lost. How do I get it back to the center? So just press the letter F. The F key will bring it right to the center. Now you notice that I zoomed in and out. This is a little tricky. So what you want to do is you want to hold the Alt key and then move the character left and right. You'll see that I can move it left and right. Now I'm going to go off of the model and hit Shift, and he snaps there. I want to move him up and down or left and right while I'm holding the Alt key. If I start moving him and let go of the Alt key, it will zoom out or zoom in. Okay? It gets a little tricky to kind of remember how to do that, but if you keep pressing Alt, you'll see it goes from moving it in and out to just moving it up and down. But this is something you'll get used to. So that's how we move the character. So we move left, we move right, just to kind of in this sort of 3D space. And then if I want to zoom out, I hold down the Alt key while moving it, and then it'll zoom in and out. Okay, so that's the simplest of interfaces right now for moving the character around. Now what you're going to notice also is this menu over here that says Subtool. It'll show you an image of what you're sculpting on. This is just a simple sphere. If you hover over it, you'll see it appear over here, and it'll tell you how big the sphere is, how many polys there are. Right now, this is a simple poly. It's got 8,192 polys. Now, that's not bad, but if you try to sculpt on this, you'll see that it's very, very coarse, and you're not going to get much detail with that. So a quick way to add more polys is to divide it. Now I'm going to do a Control-Z, Control-Z, just to get rid of what I've done so far. Now you can go to the folder, but the menu on the right side that says Geometry, okay, and the Geometry, you'll see that you can change a lot of the topography of this model. So what I'm going to do is, instead of opening up this geometry menu, I'm going to just hold down the Control key and hit the letter D. Now you'll see as I did that, we have the resolution get a little bit denser, a little bit more dense. So over here you'll see the polyfill. You can kind of see what the poly groups look like and the poly frame looks like. In your interface, it might be along this strip right here. And I have it over here out of convenience. But if I were to divide it again, either by going Control D or just divide right here, it'll get more dense. If I turn this off and then turn it back on, you'll see that it's getting denser and denser. So if I were to zoom in, you can see all these little divisions in each of those polygroups. So now I'm going to turn that wireframe off. And now when I go to sculpt, you'll see that I've got a better resolution here. Okay? So that resolution will give you more depth and more abilities to put detail in. Now, the other thing we have to realize is that right now I have this tiny little point, this red circle with another red circle on the inside. That's the size of your brush. Now, if you're holding down the space bar, that pops up. Now, this has all kinds of great stuff. Some of the stuff that you see on my interface to the left or to the right is actually in this window. So if you ever need it, you can just pop that up and then make some changes. Now, for me, I'm going to make I'm going to use this top slider to make the brush very wide or very small. So if I want to do some major sculpting on this, some big rough outs, I can make that really large. If I want to do some really fine points, I can get that really small and do some fine sort of detail. Okay? Now, depending on which brush you use, this becomes very, very important. So now I'm going to make this brush really large, and you'll see right below that is the focal shift. And this is kind of like Photoshop, where if you open it up really wide, it softens the brush. If you close it down really far, it focuses the brush. So if you have a brush that has a sharp edge to it, you can make it a little softer. You can kind of micro manage how you want each of the brushes to act. Now you'll also notice Z intensity. This Z intensity, I'll bring it over here to make it easier to see. If you kick it up higher, it means that if you're carving in or adding material, it will add more of it or less of it. It kind of makes the brush a little bit more subtle or a little bit more intense. Now, right below here, this is something we're not going to get into right now, but you'll see right now that this is set to Z add, which means on the Z axis, it's going to add, or you could click it to Z sub, which will take away. Now, if we're going to be using this simple standard brush, I'm going to make it smaller so you can see what's going on, is that if I use it as it is, it will add material. If I hold down the Alt key, it will take away material. So regular adds, it adds add, so it's Z add, and holding down the Alt key is Z sub. Okay, now normally any of the brushes you use will work the opposite way if you use it while holding down the Alt key. But you can also go up here if you want it to be a permanent or a long-lasting effect. You could hit Z sub, you can change the Z intensity, you can do a lot of stuff up here. But a lot of that is by pressing the space bar right there, and that'll give you a lot of your options. Now, if we had a second sphere, like we wanted a second sphere or add another shape for us to deal with, what we can do is we can go over to our subtool, and you'll see some options down here. Before I get into that, let me just do a couple more things with some different brushes. So if you want a brush, you can see I've got some of my favorites here, but what you can do is you can hit the letter B, and that brings up your entire brush menu. Now there's so many here to choose from. A lot of them are just you're not going to use right away because there's things to do with hair and texture and all kinds of other things. But you'll get used to and figure out what your favorite tools are. Now I'm going to pick a move tool. So I press the letter B to get this menu up. Now I'm going to hit the letter M, and the M will allow you to see all the brushes that start with the letter M. I'm going to pick this move brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm moving parts of this sphere. Now, if I keep my brush really, really small, it's going to affect these tiny little spaces. Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z to get rid of that. Because what happens sometimes when you use the move tool, I'm going to make this larger by pressing the space bar and using the slider. If I pull really hard, it's going to distort this sphere, and if I turn on the wireframe, you'll see that everything gets distorted. Okay, so what you want to do is when you start to use these tools is you want to use them subtly. You want to make subtle movements. Okay, you don't want to do it too dramatically at first. There's ways to fix that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, I'm going to turn the wireframe off. Now I noticed that some of you are having trouble when you're making some moves in the front of your sphere. It might not be affecting the entire sphere. You can see if I'm turning this to the left or to the right, and I have this little brush, you can see it's not really affecting the back of this sphere. So let's get rid of all these moves. Hang on, I'm going backwards. Oh, another way to get rid of all the steps that you've done is you'll see that there's this space bar up here. If I go all the way over to here, it looks the way it was. If I keep going back, it slowly undoes everything. So you can go all the way back to the beginning if you want, or go all the way back to where you were. This is basically a history slider. But I'm just going to get rid of everything. And if you've done a lot and if you get rid of it all, they're going to say, "Are you sure you want to do some more of this?" So you say yes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a quick drawing with my standard brush. and I'm going to just do a little bit of sculpting just so that we can see what's happening with this sphere. So if I wanted to change the shape of this head, I don't want to use, I'm going to go back to use the move button. So I'm going to press the B, and you'll notice along the top edge right here are some of the recent brushes that you've used. So instead of going and looking through all these, you'll see that I've used the move brush. There's about half a dozen that I've used before, more recently. So I'm going to quick pick the move button. So say if I want to give this character some cheekbones, which is great because I'm only affecting the front of this, but if I wanted to affect the entire shape of the head, what I want to do is I hold down the space bar, make it really large, and then I'm going to go in there and I can look at it from the front, and I'm going to start to move it in like this. Now if I were to move that, you'll see that I'm affecting the entire sphere. Okay, if I were to do that again, and you'll see that I'm going to Apple Z that a few times, and I'm going to move this over. So now I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to make this nice and small, and I'm going to go and push this in and push and start to make these moves. But then when I look at it in profile, I realize I haven't affected the back of the sphere. So the size of your brush really is very, very important when you're making decisions about changing the shape of something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that again. I'm going to make the brush very large. I'm going to turn it to the side a little bit. I'm going to move that in. I'm going to try to make this a face, and I'm going to try to affect it a little bit by making some major moves with the brush being very large. So you see, by constantly checking what I'm doing and moving things aside, I can make these subtle moves and affect the entire sphere or just a little bit of it. So you'll see that now I'm not having any weirdness back here unless I really want it. So I'm going to make it large. I want to make this head a little bit more pointy. I might bring this head in. Now we're going to do something really quick, and what it's going to be is we're going to turn on the mesh. So you see that this mesh doesn't look too bad, so I don't need to do anything yet. But if I wanted to clean that up, what I could do is I could turn on the Dynamesh. Now the Dynamesh is something that will repair any strange anomalies from you pulling and pushing and adding to this mesh. So you can see some of the polys are taking these weird curves. It's not that bad, but for right now I might want to change that. So if I wanted to change that and to get the polys back in order, I can go to this slider over here. I can go to geometry, and then I can go all the way to this thing called Dynamesh. Okay, now I could turn the Dynamesh on, but what it's going to do is it's going to complain a bit because I have multiple layers on right now. So I'm just going to delete my lower layers, and I'm going to turn on the Dynamesh, and you'll watch. You can see that they're a little bit distorted, but as soon as I turn on the Dynamesh, it's going to make it a little bit denser, and it's also, if I zoom in, you'll see that all the polygons are kind of lined up now and they're not so stretched out. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. Now I have, even though I haven't distorted this too much, I might do it some more. So what I'm going to probably do is I'm going to give this character a nose. Oops. I'm going to turn off the symmetry just for a moment. I think I'm going to do this a different way. Oh, because I've got the wrong brush chosen. I'm going to choose the move brush. Okay, I've got the move brush, and I'm going to try to move this out a bit and give this character a nose. There we go. I kept on switching to the blob button for a reason, or for a brush for some reason. So I'm going to still use, I'm using something called the snake hook, which is kind of an extreme version. of the move tool. So I'm going to try to use the move tool again because it's a little bit more subtle. Okay, now I'm starting to get some shapes going on here that I like, but then what did I do? I realized I forgot to turn on the symmetry again. So I've done all this work and I haven't put the symmetry on. So I'm going to go backwards and fix it all. Go back to where I was, where everything is okay. I'm going to turn the X key on, and now you can see the symmetry's on again. And I'm going to give this character a nose. This is one way to do it. You could just pull this nose out if you want. Another way to do it is that we could start using the masking tool. So I could make this brush a little bit smaller, and I could hold down the control key and mask an area. So, pardon me, so wherever this is masked, the model will not be affected, okay? So what I could do is I could just figure out, okay, I want to just affect this nose area. So I'm going to draw the mask on that area. And I'm going to hold on the control key and hit and click one more time outside of the model, which reverses this mask. And I'm going to move the model over, and I'm going to make my brush a bit larger, and I'm just going to pull this nose out. Okay, it's a little bit on the extreme side, but you can see that it's only affecting this area. If I were to turn this mask or the lines on, you know, the framework, you can see how distorted all this is. So if I like the shape of that nose, I like what's going on, I can clear that mask, and you'll see that it looks a little distorted here. So I can go back to Dynamesh and turn it on and off, or I could hold down the control key and click and drag, which cleans that up. So you can see how I cleaned up that mesh again. And now if I want to go in there and do some sculpting, I can. Or I could hold on the shift key and I could smooth things out. The shift key will turn that blue. You see it's blue now, which means it'll smooth those areas out. And now I can know that if I want to work on this, I can, and it will not have some funky topography. So I've clicked the clay tool, and I'm going to, I don't care for the clay tool. I'm going to go with the clay buildup tool, which I like a little bit more. It's a little bit more like clay for me, but this is something that you might find you like or you don't like. It's all going to be about figuring out which tools you like the most. So I'm going to put a little bit down and smooth it out. I'm going to change the size of the brush by holding the space bar. And then I'm going to hit the Option key and kind of drill out a couple of quick nostrils. This is very down and dirty sort of sculpting. So you can see I'm starting to get a face shape. I don't want to put too much detail on it because I still want to figure out the structure of this whole character. And what I might want to do now is add a neck. So with that same process of holding down the control key and creating a neck hole, I'm going to see where I want it to attach. I'm going to click off the model and reverse it by holding down the control key. And now I can do a couple of things. I could go back to my brush tool, grab the move brush, make it very, very large, and then just start to pull it down, which creates a neck. Okay, so you see I've created a neck for a character. I might want to stretch it out. I might want to pull it out further to kind of create a bust. I'm hitting the F key to kind of bring it back to the center so I don't get lost with where the character is. So at this point, I kind of like what's going on with this neck, but it's coming on at the wrong angle. I might want to change that. So you'll notice here, you've got move button, you've got the scale button, you've got the rotate button. On your interface, they might be along the top here. If I hit the letter E, you'll see that scale pops up. If I hit W, move, and then if I hit Q, the draw button will come up. So if I hit W, it goes to the move button. But what pops up is this gizmo. This gizmo is a really, really amazing tool. You're going to use it a lot. Okay, now what this will do is it'll distort anything that is on the screen. At this point, this neck is the only thing that is able to be used because everything else is masked off. So what I can do is I can hold down the Option key, or the Alt key, I mean, to move this around. By moving this around, I can tell the sculpture where it should pivot. So if I wanted to pivot from way up here, it would do that. If I wanted it to pivot right at the base of the neck, I can move it there and it would do some subtle moves. Now if I move it this way, you'll see that it's dead center. Now when you start to move this around back and forth, you'll see that the gizmo goes for the ride. Sometimes when you're working with the gizmo and you want to realign the XY axes, what you can do is you hold down the Option key, the Alt key, and you press this button right here, which what that'll do is it'll reset this, okay? So say if it's at a really distorted angle, you hold down the Option key, you hit that to reset it, and what that does is it allows you to make these subtle moves but be on axis with the model and the space within the drawing area, okay? But I can also not only move things around like this, I can move them back and forth on the straight axes using these. As you use the gizmo, different parts of it will light up. So if I wanted to rotate a little bit, you'll see that light up. Rotate it in this direction, that will light up. But for me, what I want to do is I maybe want to make it a little larger. So what I could do is I could hold down the Alt key to move it here. I could use this yellow square in the center to make it just a little larger, it kind of inflating it. So you can see that the shoulders are starting to get as wide as the character. Maybe that's too much, so I can make it a little smaller. But that's what happens when you're using the Move tool. You can affect these things. When you start bringing in different shapes, different sub-tools, different layers, this Move gizmo is going to come in so handy. Okay, so now I'm done distorting and moving that around. I'm going to go back to the draw mode, and I'm going to hold down Control, drag, and click, and now I've cleared my mask. Now if I were to hold this frame or put the wireframe on, you'll see how really crazy distorted everything is. And this looks fine because it hasn't been moved. So what do? We go back to Dynamesh and we turn it on. So I could go down to the Geometry subtool and hit Dynamesh on and off, or I could hold down the Control key, click, and drag. And now that's cleaned things up again. So now what I can do is sculpt here. Now you'll see that there's a lot of artifacts left over from when it was distorted. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and smooth that all out, and smooth that all out. Okay, and it's looking a little bit better. Now the characters, you know, very strange looking and all that. But when I start building a face, I've seen a lot of people sculpt the eyes directly on this model. For me, that becomes difficult because I might want to change my mind about where the eyes are going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a sphere. Now I've done this in class already, but I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to go to the Subtool menu. I'm going to drop down to the Append area, and then you'll see this box light up if it wants to stay up. And you can add anything. You can add anything from this area here. So I'm going to grab a sphere. Now you'll see that the sphere appears as a separate layer just below your main tool or your main layer. Okay. Now I'm going to click on that, and so I don't get confused, I'm going to go down here. I'm going to name this Eyeball 1 or I1 and then hit Enter. So now you can see between here and here, I can tell with the different layers on. Right now, because we only have 2 layers, it's not a big deal, but if you have something with 20 layers, naming it's very important. So I'm going to rename this main one as Test Head. Okay, now I know where the test head is and the eye is. So now here's where we can use the gizmo again. So we're going to hit the letter W, and I'm going to start to move this around. Now where did it go? It's actually inside or behind that model. So if I want to be able to see where it is, I could go over here to transparency, and it'll make the model anything that's not on this layer transparent, so I can see this to move it around. It's over here in my UI. You're probably going to find it over here in your interface. So now I'm going to turn it this way. I'm going to move it forward. I'm going to shrink it a little bit like so until I'm happy where it's landed. Now, at some point, using the transparency gets a little bit difficult because you're not sure where it is. So I'm going to turn that off, and you're going to see that this character is starting to have an eye placed where I want to. I'm going to hit draw so I can really take a look at it. So let's say I like this model, or I like this position of the eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to here. Here's the eye. I'm going to duplicate it. Now you see what we have here is now we have 3 layers. So I could click on that model so you can see this lights up and this goes dark. This is the one that we're going to be working on. This is that eye. This is a second eye, but it's right on top of this one, so it doesn't make much difference. It doesn't change. So if I go to this subtool here called deformation and hit this button that says mirror, you'll see that the eye pops over here. Where did this one go? Let's go back to the subtool. You'll see that there's a little eye right here. By turning that on or off, it disappears or reappears. Okay? I could turn the main one off and you could see just these 2 eyes. And I could turn it back on. So now what I want to do is I want to have these eyes on the same layer. So let's do this. We're going to highlight this layer. We're going to go down to merge. Merge usually looks like that. I'm going to merge down. Now this will pop up. It says, do you really want to do this? I really do. It's going to pop up every time unless you hit OK and skip. And now these are on the same layer. The name is transferred down, and you can see back and forth. Those are the 2 layers that we're working on. If you don't want to go to the subtool, you can actually hit Alt and click on that, or click on that and it'll jump right to it. So now if I want to work on the head, it doesn't affect the eyes. If I want to click on the eyes, I can move them around without affecting the rest of the head. Make sure that you have the X symmetry on by hitting the letter X so that when you want to go move these eyes, you can move them in a symmetrical way. Okay? Unless you're going to have an asymmetrical face. We could talk about that later on when we talk about sculpting. But now you can see how I have different layers and how I have the model with the different eyes on there. And we can go from there. Now, if I wanted to start sculpting on this character and start working out some of the details of the head, if I want, say if I'm done with the structure and I really like it, I might move forward. But before I do that, I probably want to work on some of the musculature, and I might use this clay buildup and make it larger and start working on those shoulders. I think that maybe this tool is a little too coarse, so I'm probably going to use clay. You can see the intensity of this clay is not great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift it around. So right now it's the intensity is cranked up to 11. I'm going to crank it down a little bit. I'm going to change the focal length a little bit, or the focal shift. I'm going to see if that's any better. That's still too much. So I am going to make this smaller, bring the intensity down to 26, and let's not worry about that, I'm sorry. Let's worry about this. Okay, so you'll see that now I can actually draw in some musculature and make some better build-ups and slowly build up the musculature of this body. Now, depending on how hard you hold down your cursor or your stylus, you could start to add a lot by pressing hard, or a little bit by just pressing lightly. Okay? And you want to look at this from multiple angles. You just don't want to look from the front. You have to constantly move around. When you're out here in the real world and you're sculpting on something, you're going to want to look at it from here, from here, from here, all different ways. So constantly check yourself. Don't always work from one direction. Now I'm going to make this brush wide, and I'm going to start to smooth out some of this. So what I often do is I'll add and then I'll smooth. I'll add and then I'll smooth before I start doing anything. We don't want to put any detailing in yet because we don't want to. This is the let's call this the foundation of the building you're creating, and that building is a character. So what you're going to want to do is work on the foundation before you start working on any of the details. You don't want to hang the curtains before you've made the structure of what the house will be sitting on. So I might still play around with the face structure and the jawline. Even putting the nose in was a little premature, but I was just making things up as I go along. Now, if I wanted to add our block in the ears, I might go back to using the masking tool and mask a shape, and then I might reverse it by clicking off and holding Control, and then I might go to the Move tool, and I might just move those ears out. Oh, what's going on there? Let's see what's going on. Oh, I know what's going on. I forgot to turn off the symmetry. Actually, I want to keep the symmetry on, but what's going on here is that you can see that the gizmo is right in the center. So when I start to do this, it's going to break. It's going to break everything. So what I want to do is when I want things to happen on both sides, I hold on the Option key and I move the gizmo off to one side. Now I can slightly move that out so I can kind of make an ear shape. Now I could go from the top too, hold down the Option key, and also make them kind of come out like that a little bit, or like that. Or maybe I want to stretch a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the draw mode. You can start to see what I've got. Before I get out of this mask area, I might want to use the Move tool once again to start to kind of shape these ears just a little bit. I don't need to make anything detailed yet, but I kind of get an idea of what I want as I go along here. And again, I'm rushing through this, but we're just doing some sketches on your heads. So I just cleared the mask, and you can kind of start to see I've got a character going on, and I'm making some decisions about what he should look like and where his ears should be, what his neck muscles look like. So there's so much more to do with this. So this is just a brief instructional. I'm going to post this so you can watch it, so you can rewind it over and over, because it gets a little confusing during class because everybody's kind of moving at different speeds and a lot of people have questions. So what I could do with this head too is there's kind of a cheat. If I want to go back and get rid of those ears, I can, and it's not cheating, you're just really using the program to its best abilities. I can turn on the brush button. I can go to this IMM parts here, and you'll see all these parts show up over here. And I might pick an ear, and then I'm going to draw that ear in. I'm going to do that again from this side. I'm going to draw that ear into the head. Okay, so I just drew it in, but you'll see now that it's not really in the right position that I want. So I'm going to hit the E key, and that will allow me to move these ears where I want to. I'm going to try to move them as a part of the head. I can change the angle, I can change the shape, I can change their position in this way, and I'm going to go back to draw. So you can see everything is masked except these parts that I just added. I'm going to clear that mask, and that's what it looks like. Now if I were to turn that on, you'll see that there are different densities of mesh. Again, this is something that you can do. I would suggest personally trying to sculpt the ear and the nose and everything, and then use this on other occasions when you're in a hurry. You'll learn a lot more by sculpting an ear rather than putting that on there like that. There's more to this, but you'll see that by going to this brush menu, there's so many choices and so many things you can do. but this is the first tutorial. I'm going to go over a lot of this again in class and help each of you out to get to this point. So I hope this really helps. Let me know. Thank you.